The Imperial Japanese Army was brutal as f***. The Nanjing Massacre, also known as the Rape of Nanjing, began in 1937 during the Second Sino-Japanese War. After the Japanese took the Chinese capital of Nanjing, the Japanese military committed around 6 weeks of chaotic violent devastation in which Japanese soldiers brutally killed between 200,000 to 300,000 innocent Chinese civilians as well as soldiers and prisoners of war. Along with these brutal killings, the Japanese also committed acts of torture. There was even 2 Japanese soldiers who had a killing competition to see who could kill 100 people with a sword the fastest. The Japanese looted and set fire to the city and also perpetrated brutal predatory acts on between 20,000 to 80,000 women, as well as children and elderly women. The massacre was overseen by General Owani Matsui, who later called it a terrible disgrace. He was executed by hanging in 1948. The Bataan Death March. In 1941, during World War II, only a few hours after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the Imperial Japanese Army invaded the Philippines, which led to the United States and the Filipino Commonwealth military retreating to the area of Bataan, where they held out against the Japanese for 3 months until disease, starvation, and low ammunition led to surrender. The Japanese then forcibly made an estimated 65,000 Filipino soldiers and around 10,000 American soldiers walk on a 65-mile death march to Japanese prisoner of war camps. Around 10 to 15,000 soldiers perished from exhaustion, starvation, disease, beatings, and executions. If anybody stopped while walking on the march for any reason, even from malarious sickness or complete and utter exhaustion, they were killed. Cannibalism. During World War II, the Imperial Japanese Army soldiers practiced cannibalism. According to the historian Yuki Tanaka, in some cases the soldiers did not practice cannibalism due to being starving. Instead, they carried out the practice as a bonding ritual. Evidence has been found that at least 100 documented cases of Japanese cannibalism took place on Australian and Indian soldiers during World War II. In 1944, the Imperial Japanese Army shot down American planes over the island of Chichijima and captured 8 American airmen. The prisoners were executed and beheaded, and 4 of the men were cannibalized by Japanese soldiers. The 9th pilot and the only man to evade capture happened to be the future president George H.W. Bush. Comfort women. The Imperial Japanese Army systematically enslaved and exploited women in military brothels before and during World War II. The women, who were mostly Korean, Chinese, and Filipino, were known as comfort women and were deceived with fake job offers, coerced, and in some instances kidnapped before being imprisoned in brothels to be abused by Japanese soldiers. The women were beaten, starved, and severely punished if they stepped out of line. Unit 731. Unit 731 was the secret biological and chemical warfare unit of the Imperial Japanese Army, used during the Second Sino-Japanese War and World War II. The unit conducted evil experiments on around 14,000 victims, including Chinese civilians, prisoners of war, and women, who were referred to as maruta or logs. The prisoners were vivisected without anesthesia, infected with deadly diseases, subjected to frostbite tests, and used in weapons testing. Unit 731 and its affiliate units, Unit 1644 and Unit 100, carried out biological research that led to attacks that resulted in the deaths of an estimated 300,000 people. After the war, the US government granted immunity to the leaders of Unit 731 in exchange for their research data. The Manila Massacre. In 1945, US and Filipino forces began to liberate Manila from Japanese occupation. Japanese soldiers were told not to surrender, and instead the soldiers took their revenge and frustrations out on civilians. Over 100,000 civilians were massacred in evil and brutal ways. Many were beheaded and set on fire, and many deaths occurred in schools and convents. Thousands of women had intimate acts of violence perpetrated on them. The Japanese commanding general Tomoyuki Yamashita was executed in 1948.